Good day and welcome to our physical education class. My name is Mr. Pilane from the Dow Academy. Join me today as we are discussing the respiratory system. Now, according to our syllabus, code 0413, these are the learning content and objectives. The content, we are supposed to understand and know about the pathway of air, the gaseous exchange at the alveoli, and the mechanics of breathing. Now, under the pathway of air, we are supposed to understand the pathway of air into the body through the mouth or the nasal passage, the trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles, and the alveoli. This is simply understanding how air goes into the body, where it goes, how it circulates up until it is taken out. Now, with the gaseous exchange at the alveoli, we are supposed to identify and explain the characteristics of the alveoli that enable gaseous exchange, as well as explaining what the alveoli is. With the mechanics of breathing, we are supposed to understand the functions of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles in normal breathing. We are also going to explain what the diaphragm is and what intercostal muscles are. Now, about the respiratory system. This is a system which deals with breathing. So the respiratory system is one of the 11 systems of the human body, and its main function, like I have just said, is breathing. It supplies the body with oxygen for cellular respiration by collecting oxygen in the lungs and disposing of carbon dioxide by breathing out the waste product. It also provides functions of speech and smell. It is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which is the unconscious control for vital functions. Now, this system, it is the one which ensures that even if you are aware or unaware, your body can still keep on breathing. When we are at rest, this is how normal breathing usually appears. Breathing in, which is the inhalation, it goes for 1 second to 1.5 seconds. Now, the breathing out or exhalation goes for 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. Now, in between, there's an automatic pause for almost 1 to 2 seconds. So the whole process of breathing, taking in air, taking it out, and the automatic pause in between the breathing in and the breathing out will go for 5 seconds or so. Now, the diagram on the board here shows the respiratory tract. So, the respiratory system is divided into two. That is the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract will be the pharynx, larynx, epiglottis, and the trachea. Now, our lower respiratory tract will be inside the lungs. That is the bronchioles, the bronchus, and the alveolus. So, we are supposed to explain the pathway of air. Now, in humans or in any other organisms, we breathe in through our nose or our mouth in other circumstances. So, when we breathe in, air goes in through the nose, it passes through the larynx and the pharynx. Now, one exciting point here is the epiglottis. Usually, when we do this topic, I get questions of, say, why is it that when you breathe in through your mouth, air doesn't go to your stomach? But when you eat, you can eat, then your food goes to your stomach, but when you breathe in through your mouth, your air does not go to your stomach. What happens there? The answer is the epiglottis. Now, this little tissue here is responsible for controlling where the air goes and where the food goes. So, the esophagus is connected to the stomach. Now, here we are dealing with the trachea. The trachea is connected to the lungs. This is where they are separated. The trachea is the windpipe, and the esophagus is for the food. It is connected to the stomach, and the trachea is connected to the lungs. That is how these two are separated. So air goes in through the nose, it passes through the pharynx, then the larynx. It is in the larynx here where the air goes into a different passage, which is the trachea. Now, air goes down through the trachea. As it goes down, it branches into the bronchioles, the bronchus. Now, the bronchus, they divide into your lungs. The bronchus further goes on to branch into smaller trees or smaller networks, which are called the bronchioles. Now, the bronchioles also further go on to branch. As they branch, at the end of each and every bronchiole is what is called the alveolus or the alveoli. It is also commonly known as the air sac. This is where gaseous exchange takes place. Now, as I have just explained in the diagram, air enters the respiratory system through the nose and the mouth and passes down through the throat or the pharynx, through the voice box or the larynx. The entrance to the larynx is covered by a small flap of tissue, which is called the epiglottis, that automatically closes during swallowing, thus preventing food or drink from entering the airways. So, if you might have noticed, you cannot swallow and breathe at the same time. These two, they take place in different intervals. So you cannot breathe and swallow at the same time. This is so as to avoid the confusion between food going on into a different tract which is not supposed to be going into. Now, the windpipe or the trachea is the largest airway. The trachea branches into smaller airways, which is the left and the right bronchi, which leads into the two set of lungs, which is the right lung and the left lung. Now, each lung is divided into sections. They are called lobes in another term. Now, we have 3 in the right lung and 2 in the left lung. Now, the left lung is a little smaller than the right lung because it shares space in the left side of the chest with the heart. So it actually makes way for the heart, which is why it is a bit smaller. Now, the bronchi themselves, they divide many times into smaller airways. Now, as they branch in, they go into little networks which are called the bronchioles, which are as small as 1/2 of a millimeter. Now, the airways, it can resemble an upside-down tree, which is why this part of the respiratory system is often called the bronchial tree. Now, this is so as the trachea can be regarded to as the stem of a tree. Now, the bronchus can be regarded to as the branches of a tree. Now, the further branching of the branches can be regarded to as the bronchioles, and the fruits at the end of each and every branch can be regarded to as the alveoli. Now, the alveoli, which can also be regarded to as the air sac, are at the end of each and every bronchiole. Within each and every alveolar walls is a dense network of tiny blood cells called capillaries. This is where gaseous exchange takes place. Now, it is here in the alveoli whereby the respiratory system gets to be in contact with the circulatory system. So all of these systems in the body, one way or the other, they complement each other. So this is in a way that the body works. Each and every system complements the other. If one system is compromised, it will lead to another system not functioning well. So now we are heading much more into the gaseous exchange. Now, gaseous exchange, as we have mentioned, it takes place at the alveoli. Now, the alveoli, as we have explained, they are also called air sacs. This is where gaseous exchange takes place. Now, in the diagram, as you can see, there is a lung here and another lung on the left side and the other lung on the right side. Now, the picture here on my right is an extension of the picture on the left. it shows a typical example of how a human alveolus looks like. So this is our bronchiole, and at the end, it is our alveolus. Now, the red and blue parts are our capillaries. As we have mentioned, at the end of each and every air sac, there is a dense network of capillaries. Now, capillaries are a link between the veins and our arteries. This is discussed more in our circulatory system topic. So, exactly what happens during gaseous exchange? Now, this diagram on our board here is a cross-section of an alveolus. This is how an alveolus looks like when it's cut down. So, during gaseous exchange, oxygen moves from the lungs to the bloodstream. At the same time, carbon dioxide passes from the blood to the lungs. This happens in the lungs between the alveoli and a network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries, which are located in the walls of the alveoli. The walls of the alveoli share a membrane with the capillaries. That's how close they are. So this lets oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse or move freely between the respiratory system and the bloodstream. Oxygen molecules are attached to the red blood cells, which travel back to the heart. At the same time, the carbon dioxide molecules in the alveoli are blown out of the body the next time a person exhales. So the diagram here shows red blood cells. These on the side are blue. As you can go along the diagram, you see that they constantly change color to become red. Now, as I have just explained, this is a cross-section of the alveolus. So what happens in the alveolus, the red lines here, which are coming in, they represent the oxygen. So this oxygen comes in, it goes into the walls of the alveolus. Now, the walls of the alveolus, they have a special characteristic which allows oxygen to go into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide to go outside the bloodstream into the air sac. Now, the alveolus is said to be semi-permeable. This is to say it allows only certain items to go through it and only certain items to go out through it. Now, the red lines or the red dots, like I have just said, they represent oxygen which is coming in from the nose. It comes in through the trachea, the bronchus, bronchioles, and to the end of the alveolus. It is here at the wall of the alveolus whereby oxygen diffuses into the bloodstream. As it diffuses into the bloodstream, the carbon dioxide which is in the bloodstream is diffused back into the air sac. Now, the carbon dioxide here is represented by the blue arrows. So, this is the blood which comes in and is deoxygenated. Now, it constantly changes color to become red. The reason for this is that the blood which is blue, or which is represented by the blue red blood cells here, does not have oxygen, but it is full of carbon dioxide. So as it comes in, it goes along the alveolus and it drops in the carbon dioxide inside the air sac. As it does so, it gets oxygen which is from the air sac into the bloodstream, thus changing color from blue to red. The blood which has been oxygenated, it goes back to the body to do respiratory functions. Now, mechanics of breathing. Mechanics of breathing are how it comes about to breathe. What exactly is being, or what exactly happens in your body for you to be able to breathe. Now, we have what is called the intercostal muscles. So the intercostal muscles, if you can take a closer look to the two diagrams that I have here, you'll realize that this is the rib cage, or it's a skeletal system. Now, there is the reddish color, which you can see, or which is visible in these two diagrams. Now, this reddish color is our intercostal muscles. Now, these intercostal muscles, they are a sheet of muscles which cover the rib cage all around, from the chest to the back. Now, what do? Your intercostal muscles, they attach to your ribs. When you breathe in, they normally contract and move your ribs up. At the same time, your diaphragm, which is a thin muscle that separates your chest and your abdomen, drops lower and your lungs fill with air. Now, we'll discuss more about the diaphragm after this. The intercostal muscles lift and expand the rib cage, allowing for exhalation or breathing out. The internal intercostal muscles pull down on the rib cage and push air out of the lungs. Now, there is the internal intercostal muscles and the external intercostal muscles. The internal intercostal muscles are the ones that you see in between your ribs. Now, the external intercostal muscles are the ones which cover the rib cage. Now, the internal intercostal muscles are the most important respiratory muscles for normal speech and singing, for they are muscles that propel air out through the mouth and nose. Further going on, we are still dealing with the mechanics of breathing. Now we are taking a closer look to the diaphragm. In the diagram here, we have two sets of lungs. As we have explained in the previous slide, the diaphragm is found just below your lungs. Now, this red muscle here is our diaphragm. As you can see, it is located just beneath our lungs. So, what is the diaphragm and what does it do? The diaphragm is a thin skeletal muscle that sits at the base of the chest and separates the abdomen from the chest. It contracts and flattens when you inhale. So this creates a vacuum effect that pulls air into the lungs. So when you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes and the air is pushed out of the lungs. Now, in our next slide, it will clarify the statement that we have here. It also has some non-respiratory functions as well. The diaphragm increases abdominal pressure to help the body to get rid of vomit, urine, and feces. Now, the phrenic nerve, which runs from the neck to the diaphragm, controls movement of the diaphragm. There are three large openings in the diaphragm that allow certain structures to pass between the chest and the abdomen. Now remember, the diaphragm's main function is to help breathing by relaxing and contracting, and also to divide the abdomen and the chest. Now, as it divides the abdomen and the chest, there are only three openings. That is the esophageal opening, the one which is a pathway of food to the stomach. Remember, the stomach is in our abdomen. Then there is the aortic opening. Now, the aortic opening is the opening for the aorta. The aorta is the body's main artery that transports blood from the heart. So, our abdomen also needs a constant supply of blood. So that is why we have the aortic opening, which allows the aorta to pass through from your heart onto the lower abdomen. Then we have the caval opening. The inferior vena cava, which is a large vein that transports blood to the heart, passes through this opening. Now, the caval opening is the vein which transports blood without oxygen. Remember, the aorta carries blood with oxygen, and the vena cava transports blood without oxygen, or less in oxygen, otherwise known as deoxygenated blood. Then oxygenated blood for blood which is rich in oxygen or which contains oxygen. Moving on, this is a diagram of what happens when you breathe in and when you breathe out. The inhalation and exhalation. What happens to the diaphragm, what happens to your intercostal muscles, and what happens to your lungs when you breathe in and out. So it is the process of breathing or respiration. It is divided into two distinct phases. The first phase is called inspiration or inhaling. When the lungs inhale, the diaphragm contracts. So this is the diagram which confirms this statement. Breathing in. Now here is our diaphragm. It contracts. At the same time, the muscles between the ribs contract and pull upward. This increases the size of the thoracic cavity and decreases pressure inside the lungs. As a result, air rushes in and fills the lungs. So as you inhale, you can take a closer look to the red part here, which is our lung. As you can see, it is bigger in size. It is bigger in size. This is because air has rushed in and occupied our lung, thus making it bigger in size. And as it occupies the lung, our diaphragm here, it contracts, thus it moves downwards. So the second phase is called expiration or exhalation. When the lungs exhale, the diaphragm relaxes and the volume of the thoracic cavity decreases, while the pressure within it increases. As a result, the lung contracts and air is forced out. So the second aspect of this diagram here shows the breathing out or expiration. So when you expire or when you breathe out, the diaphragm relaxes. As it relaxes, it goes up. By going up, it contracts or it shortens the surface area of our lung. Now, as our lung contracts, it forces all the air which is inside to go out, thus shortening in size. So three aspects happen here. The diaphragm relaxes, the lung also shortens in size, and the chest contracts. While also in breathing in, three aspects come into play. The chest expands, the diaphragm contracts, and our lung becomes bigger. So that is that about the respiratory system. At first, we discussed what the respiratory system is. We mentioned that the respiratory system is a system which deals with breathing, which is the taking in of air and the taking out of air in our body. We also went on to explain the pathway of air in the body, which is to say, air goes in through the nose, it further goes down through the pharynx and the larynx. It is here at the epiglottis where air goes into the trachea. The trachea, also known as the windpipe. Now in the trachea, air goes down and divides into the bronchus. Now the bronchus are within our lungs. In the bronchus, air further goes on into the bronchioles. Now the bronchioles are extensions of the bronchus. They are further branches of the bronchus. Now, in each and every bronchiole, there is an air sac or bunch of air sacs, which are called the alveoli. It is here in the alveoli where gaseous exchange takes place. Now, this is a typical example of the alveoli, where gaseous exchange takes place. We did mention that at the end of each and every alveoli, or in the surface area of the alveoli, there is a network of capillaries. Capillaries which are a link between veins and arteries. We went on to explain how gaseous exchange happens. We did explain that the air which comes in through the trachea, the bronchus, the bronchioles into the alveoli, which is the oxygen, is diffused into the bloodstream. At the same time, the carbon dioxide, which is from the respiring cells, goes out from the bloodstream into the alveoli or the air sac to be breathed out, while the oxygen, which is diffused into the bloodstream, goes into the waking muscles so that the process of energy production can take place. We also went on to describe the mechanics of breathing, and in the mechanics of breathing we have three items, which are the intercostal muscles, the diaphragm, So in our intercostal muscles, we explained that intercostal muscles, they are divided into two. We have the internal intercostal muscles and the external intercostal muscles. The internal intercostal muscles are the ones which are in between the rib cage. Then the external intercostal muscles are the ones which cover the rib cage. Now the diagram above here shows the internal intercostal muscles, the ones which are in between the rib cage. Now the diagram below here shows an example of the external intercostal muscle, which are the ones which cover the rib cage. Now we did explain that as you breathe in and as you breathe out, the internal intercostal muscles, they contract and relax, thus to help your rib cage to expand and to contract. We went on to describe and know about the diaphragm, which is a sheet of muscle which divides the lungs and the abdomen. Now, we did explain that the diaphragm, its main function is to contract and relax during breathing. Its other function also is to divide our upper chest and our lower abdomen. We went on to describe the process of breathing, what happens when you breathe, how your body responds when you are breathing, what happens when you are breathing to your chest, to your lungs, and to your diaphragm. These three aspects. Now remember, we said in breathing in, your chest expands, it grows in size, your ribs, they also expand, and the diaphragm contracts. As it contracts, it makes way for your lungs to expand as they are accumulating in oxygen. Now in breathing out, your chest contracts. As it contracts, it squeezes your lungs so that the air which is in the lungs can be exhaled out. The diaphragm also relaxes. As it relaxes, it goes to its normal state. So this is the normal state of the diaphragm. As it goes back, as it relaxes, it also pushes your lungs so that they can reduce in size. As they reduce in size, they squeeze, thus expelling the air that is accumulated in your lungs, which is the carbon dioxide. Thank you very much. That is all that we had for you in our respiration class.